Right, for this demonstration, I'm going to be using oil pastels. Faber-Castell is a really nice make. And before I start the drawing, which is going to be of a Strelitzia flower, I need to show you what materials you need. So first of all, obviously the pastels. I've selected colors here which relate to the flower I've chosen to use for my demonstration. And as I go along, I will select other colors that I need. The other tools that you need for this is if you can get one of these tortillons, or tortillons as they're called. You can make them yourselves from rolled paper, and they are for blending. Blending can also be done with fingers or pieces of kitchen paper, rag, anything like that. Another helpful thing to have is a brush. As you work, sometimes it gets rather dusty, and it's nice to keep the paper clean. So before I start with the drawing of this flower, I usually do a little sketch, a thumbnail sketch as it's called, just to get my layout and proportion right as to how I'm going to lay the drawing onto the paper. And instead of pencil, for oil pastels, I prefer to use an actual pastel because I'm going to be working in the medium and it doesn't make indentations on the paper as pencil would. So using my prep drawing as a guide, I'm going to put in lightly, and I hope this shows up on the video, my drawing. The initial sketch doesn't have to be detailed at all. It's just to acquire the general shape of the plant and to work in your details later. The reason I've chosen this one is because of its beautiful colors, lots of complementary colors in this flower, oranges and reds, greens and blues, which vibrate and show up against each other. Obviously your viewpoint of this flower will be slightly different from mine, so I'm just trying to get it as accurate as I can within this time limit. And hopefully we'll get quite a bit done. So I'm not putting much pressure on the pastel at all. For this, it's generally good to start working when you fill in your colors from dark to light, and to work softly, soft pressure at first, gradually building up in layers until you get to your final layer. That's approximately the shape. Okay, so I'm going to use the same orange now just to lay in a light layer of color, which is probably the darkest orange in there. What I like to do is select a range of colors that I'm going to use. So the range of reds and oranges and yellows generally fit in with red, as does pink sometimes. So that's the range of color I'll be working with, and perhaps a little introduction of pink and violet later on, as you will see. So we're starting with this color. I'm not very fussy about getting any detail as yet, and I'm leaving the bottom section. It's really helpful, I'm leaving it white, helpful to have a real object to work from, or at least a good photograph. Photographs are quite fine to use. I personally just prefer to work directly from the plant if I can get hold of reference. Otherwise, it's helpful to take a photograph as well, because the flower might die before you've completed your drawing or painting. These oil pastels can be used in combination with oil paint. I'm working on a thick, heavy-duty 300-gram watercolor paper here, which has a slight texture to it, as you see in my mark making. So later on I'll have to rub the colors in really well. Okay, so I'm working with the orange petals. I'm going to add a little bit of a lighter, maybe a brighter yellow here. This is very similar to the way the Impressionists worked with their colors vibrating against each other, placed alongside each other, as opposed to mixing on a palette. So your mixing happens on the paper. Then I can take one of my tortillons. This is quite a nice one. I made these myself, so they're not very successful. To rub in this bottom layer of color, and you'll see what happens here. I can blend the colors together, and it makes them really smooth, quite burnished, which makes the next layer work better, not to get muddled up. It's always better to work from dark to light, because if you try to put a light color over a dark color over a light color, it can go very muddy. You'll see the difference now as this is getting rubbed into the paper itself. I have made a few of these. You can also buy them in your art shop, because you can only use one for each color range, obviously. So to make, I would generally work on all of them like that first, but for the purpose of this exercise, I'm going to add a little more definition here. Give myself artistic license to brighten the colors that I see if possible. Nature is so beautiful with its color range, it's quite difficult to compete with it. Lighter yellow in here. And clean tortillon. Let's blend in this red, so it softens the lines very much. This is all about seeing. When you're working from life in this way, it helps your eye to get accustomed to seeing the different variations in value, tone, shadow, and light, which is the best way to learn any medium, I think, drawing particularly. And don't be afraid or too cautious, because sometimes mistakes work for us, or we can always adapt whatever's happened, fix it as we go along. Just to show you what happens, lighter colors are very useful. Towards the end stages, I generally do this. Just clean this color off a little. Sometimes your oil pastels will get a build-up of other color on them. So just to rub them on a piece of clean paper. You see what happens here. If I want any lights, usually, as I say, do this towards the end. They work very well on top of the other layers. Maybe some of that very, very pale over the bright yellow here. At the edges where the light's catching. blend it in. This is a bit strong, so if your line happens to feel it's a little strong, you can add lighter color on top just to soften that red. I've used the red just to make the orange stronger. Red and yellow combined with orange gives you your darks and lights values within. I see I've got a bit of green on here which I should have cleaned off. It's good when these things happen during a demonstration because I can show you how to fix that. You can use a fingernail or a knife blade just to scratch off. Scratching also creates a nice line in your work if you wanted to have that texture or a hard line anywhere. That's not too bad. To start this next petal, I'm going to add in some bright yellow just on the edge of that. I want to show you what color you can use to get that darkish value. You'll notice I'm trying to keep a sense of order here, but it's not imperative that you do. I'm a poor one at having an orderly way of working, and it never seems to harm my artwork at the end. It's just the way I am. And it's good to remember that. Too many rules can make you very stilted and afraid of venturing further into a medium of any kind. And fear is very debilitating. So I'm going to introduce here a totally complementary color to orange and yellow. We can use a blue or violet. In this case, I'm going to use a light violet just to get that vein running up the middle there, that crease line. Very softly. I haven't applied much pressure because I don't want it to be too strong and breaking the rules, because dark is usually under light, but in this case it's necessary to break those rules to get a softer, more muddy version of that dark. Using a clean tortillon, let's see how that blends in. Every new subject I do always faces more challenges, different challenges, because each new artwork is in a different light, which makes a difference to the colors and so forth. I'm going to work more into that now with a bit of this orange here. All the process of layering. Within that we have some lights. I'm using the light sort of fleshy color, orange, pink. Some more violet just at the bottom where the shadow is here. Remembering you can always go over your darks again later with a lighter color to soften them. Use some of this pale yellow here. Just to give you an idea of finished picture can look like. This is one that I completed on a greyish background. So I think that's probably all I can do for this particular video. There's not much time on each one, I'm afraid. So we'll continue on the next one. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it's going to get you started with your drawing in oil pastels.